Hey everyone, welcome back to the Luffy Nika channel. Today, we're not just going over the usual spoilers. Instead, we're going to break down the drama that's been blowing up the One Piece community across social media, especially on X and TikTok. It all started when the first spoilers for Chapter 1161 dropped, revealing that legendary Vice Admiral Garp appeared and single-handedly stopped the future three emperors, Whitebeard, Big Mom, and Kaido. I'm sure many of you felt the same way I did when you read the line, Whitebeard, LinLin and Kaido run away from Garp. It was a huge what? And immediately, a wave of opinions and short videos flooded the internet, all claiming that the powerful trio tucked tail and ran, basically saying they were scared witless by Garp's fists. The popular take is that this proves a prime Garp was on a completely different level than the other legends, and that those three were just cowards when faced with absolute power. But is that really what happened? Can one short sentence in a brief spoiler summary truly define the entire nature of a historic confrontation? In today's video, we're going to peel back the layers, dive deeper into the situation at God Valley, and analyze the characters' mindsets to get to the truth of this encounter. Let's get started. God Valley, the bloodbath of an era and internal betrayal. Before we talk about who was chasing whom, the most critical thing to understand is what the hell was actually happening at God Valley. This wasn't some scheduled duel on a deserted island. This was God Valley, the site of an incident so massive the world government later erased it from history entirely. It was a chaotic battlefield of the highest order, a crucible melting down the most powerful forces in the world. Just look at the factions present: the Rocks Pirates, the Roger Pirates, the Marines with Garp, and don't forget the Holy Knights and the Celestial Dragons were there too. This was a multi-sided war, a game of life and death where every wrong move could be your last. But the most decisive factor, the key detail that so many people on X missed, was in the spoiler line right before. Many of the pirates betrayed Rocks. This wasn't just a fight against an external enemy, it was a civil war. The Rocks Pirates, a crew that seemed unsinkable, was falling apart from the inside. Crewmates from yesterday were now enemies with knives pointed at each other's backs. The chaos wasn't just coming from Garp or Roger, it was coming from within their own ranks. In a situation like that, what's the ultimate goal for the loyal core members of the Rocks crew? Is it to jump into a meaningless deathmatch with a Marine Vice Admiral just to prove a point? Absolutely not. Their number one priority was to handle the internal mutiny and find their captain. Imagine you're Whitebeard. You see your comrades killing each other, your captain is missing, and enemies are closing in from all sides. Do you really have time to stop and go all out against a guy famous for his relentless tenacity, like Garp? That's why the actions of Whitebeard, Big Mom, and Kaido can't be simply seen as they met Garp and ran. It should be called a tactical retreat in a situation that was hanging by a thread. They weren't running from Garp, they were racing against time. They were trying to escape a death trap, a quagmire of a battle that would have cost them everything if they got stuck. Finding Rocks was the logical and top priority. Whitebeard has always been a strategist, the Marineford arc showed that clearly. And don't forget the earlier spoiler line stating that the trio had already defeated, or I repeat, all of the traitorous allies. Fighting Garp at that moment offered no strategic advantage. On the contrary, it would have just dragged them deeper into the chaos, creating an opening for the traitors and other forces to benefit. The decision to withdraw from Garp wasn't an act of weakness, it was a clear-headed and incredibly smart decision in a completely insane environment. Now, let's analyze the mindsets and power of the three main characters in this retreat. Lumping all three together and saying they ran is a massive oversimplification because each one had a completely different reaction and role in this situation. First, let's talk about Kaido. The spoilers tell us that Kaido wanted to fight Garp, and that says everything about who he was at the time. He was still very young, maybe a teenager or young adult, a literal apprentice on the Rocks crew. This was a young, battle-hungry Kaido, always looking for a top-tier fight to prove himself. For him, seeing the Marine hero Garp was like a bull seeing red. He wanted to charge in, to test his strength, to see just how hard Garp's fists really were. Kaido was acting purely on a warrior's instinct, not as a leader with strategic thinking. This detail alone proves that, at least from Kaido's side, there was no fear. He wanted to fight, but was held back by the other two. Next is Charlotte LinLin. She was also young but already a formidable force. The spoilers show she didn't back down immediately. LinLin attacked Garp with a fire-based attack, but it was useless. This indicates they had a brief clash. Big Mom, with her hot-tempered nature, immediately tried to counter-attack Garp, but it had no effect. This detail is crucial because it shows Garp wasn't an opponent who could be dealt with quickly. An attack from a future emperor, even if not at her peak, was easily neutralized by Garp. This neutralization likely made Big Mom realize that this fight would drag on for a very long time with no good outcome. She was smart enough to understand that continuing to attack a steel wall like Garp, while a fire raged behind her, was a suicidal move. Besides, let's not forget that even Roger was wary of engaging Big Mom. Do you really think a prolonged fight with her wouldn't give Garp pause? And finally, the person who decided the group's direction was none other than Edward Newgate, Whitebeard. He was the one who made the final declaration. He said they had to retreat because they had no time to fight. If Kaido represented youthful aggression and Big Mom represented a hot-tempered reaction, then Whitebeard was the brain, the cool head of the group. His role and the trust placed in him on the Rock's crew were immense. He saw the entire chaotic battlefield for what it was. He understood that their greatest enemy wasn't Garp in front of them, but the betrayal spreading through their ranks behind them. Whitebeard's words held no hint of fear. They were a purely strategic assessment. No time for simple words that carry the weight of an entire era. This is the wisdom of a man who would later be called the strongest man in the world, not just for his physical strength, but for his mind and leadership. He pushed aside Kaido's battle lust and likely Big Mom's frustration to make a difficult but correct choice, prioritizing the survival of his entire faction over a fight for personal glory. This decision to run was actually one of the first signs of his qualities as a king of the seas. To complete the picture, we have to talk about the final character, Monkey D. Garp. Garp, the endurance of a titan, the roadblock of legends. Why would a brilliant strategist like Whitebeard need to avoid a fight with Garp at all costs, even if their power levels weren't that far apart? Because Garp isn't just strong, he is incredibly tenacious. Tenacity here isn't a negative term, it refers to Garp's durability, his stubbornness, and his relentless pursuit in a fight. Garp's fighting style isn't about finishing an opponent with one or two devastating moves. He is a master of the war of attrition. He turns every fight into a marathon of stamina and willpower. The clearest evidence of this tenacity is his relationship with the Pirate King, Gold D. Roger. Sengoku once said that Garp and Roger had nearly killed each other countless times. What does that mean? It means every one of their clashes was a long, drawn-out, life-or-death battle that could never be ended quickly. Garp spent his entire career hunting Roger across every corner of the ocean. He never gives up. Once Garp locks onto you as a target, he will follow you to the ends of the earth. Whitebeard, as a great rival to both Roger and Garp, certainly understood this better than anyone. He knew that once you engage with Garp, it's not a 5 or 10-minute fight. It's a battle that could last for hours, maybe even days, until one of them collapses from exhaustion. In the context of God Valley, where every second was precious, being held up by Garp for even an hour could have been a death sentence. While they were stuck fighting Garp, the Rock's pirates could have been completely wiped out by the traitors and other forces. Therefore, Whitebeard's decision wasn't "we can't beat Garp," but rather "we can't beat Garp quickly." They weren't afraid of Garp's power destroying them instantly. They were afraid of his endurance trapping them there and ruining their entire plan. To rush in and fight him would be to fall into the biggest trap on the battlefield. The only wise choice was to bypass that obstacle to complete their main objective. And besides, if you want to say Whitebeard was scared of Garp, then who was it that fought Roger at the end of the chapter? It was Whitebeard. So, what do we have after this deep dive? The old legends should be ranked with Rocks as the strongest, followed by Roger, Garp, and Whitebeard on the same tier below him. The trio's action wasn't cowardly, it was the calculated move of minds that would one day rule an era. They weren't running from Garp, they were running from a time trap, a meaningless war of attrition that would have destroyed their greater objective. This is a lesson in strategy, about knowing when to fight and when to abandon a battle so you can win the war. Thanks for watching the video today, everyone. What do you think of this analysis? Do you agree that this was a tactical retreat? Or do you still think the future 3 emperors were genuinely scared of Garp? Don't hesitate to leave your opinions in the comments below. Let's discuss it and get more clarity on the matter. If you found this video interesting and helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support Luffy Nika. That's all for now. Goodbye, and see you next time.